Hi, my name's Sam. This is Cade. We're doing a special report on some things that happened in World War II. There's also Jonathan, who's right back here. Our first story tonight is going to be done by Cade. What is it again? It's Pearl Harbor. It's bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Our first report tonight is going to be the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which President Roosevelt called a day that lived in infamy. On the day, December 7th, 1941, Japanese planes attacked the U.S. naval base Pearl Harbor on Hawaii. The bombing killed more than 2,300 Americans. It completely destroyed the American battleship USS. The Hawaii Operation, or Operation AI, by the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters, and Operation Z during the planning was a surprise military strike by the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service against the United States Navy Naval Base.
Next story tonight is going to be about the Bell Aircraft Corporation, and they were an aircraft manufacturer for the United States during World War II. They built a whole bunch of fighter aircrafts. It was amazing. But the most famous one that they ever built was the Bell X-1, the first supersonic aircraft. And for the development and production, many important civilians and military helicopters. They also developed the reaction control system for the Mercury spacecraft, the North American X-15, and the Bell rocket belt. Okay. The company was purchased in 1960 by Textron and lives on today as Bell Helicopters. Our next story is going to be going to our lead developer on this next one, which is Jonathan. The next story tonight will be Lend-Lease.
Hello, my name is Jonathan, and I'm doing Lend-Leasing. And you're probably in your mind thinking, what is Lend-Leasing? It's the principal means for providing U.S. military aid to foreign nations during World War II. The 1941 Lend-Leasing Act allowed President Roosevelt to authorize the transfer of military materials to Great Britain with the understanding that they would ultimately be paid for or returned if they were not destroyed. Part of U.S. help was providing under the Lend-Lease Act, an act to promote the defense of the United States. In 1942, a reciprocal aid agreement, or reverse Lend-Lease, was made between the United States with Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and the Free French. Under the reverse Lend-Lease, terms goods, service, shipping, and military installations were given to American forces overseas. Well, it goes back to me again. Here I go again. Brunswick and Savannah shipyards. The natural harbor of Brunswick, located 70 miles south of Savannah, had a long maritime history before the outbreak of World War II. The 16,000 workers at the Brunswick shipyards built 99 ships, 85 of them Liberty ships, from 1941 to 1945. Liberty ships were large supply ships that carried much needed materials, were built in ports of Savannah and Brunswick. Bell Aircraft Corporation announced plans to locate a plant to build B-29 bombers, then America's largest military plane in Marietta. By fall of 1943, the huge facility was in full operation, employing 20,000 civilian workers. Among other Georgia war production facilities were shipyards for building naval vessels at Savannah and Brunswick, and weapon plants at Macon and Milledgeville. They built cargo ships for war here. Ports of Savannah and Brunswick, Georgia were home to Liberty ships during World War II. These ships were quickly built during the first year of U.S. intervention.
We'll edit that. Our next story tonight is going to be from Cade. It's Richard Russell. Take it away.
Known as Richard B. Russell Jr., full name, served in public office for 50 years as a state legislator, governor of Georgia, and U.S. Senator. Although Russell was best known for his efforts to strengthen the national defense to oppose civil rights legislation, he favored describing his role as advocate for the small farmer and for the small farmer and soil and water conservation. Russell also worked to bring economic opportunities to Georgia. He helped secure or maintain 15 military installations, more than 25 research facilities, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of the Russell Agricultural Research Center, and federal funding for development and construction. Russell believed that his most important legislative contribution was his authorship and secure passage of the National School Lunch Program in 1946.
Our next story tonight is going to be about how the Holocaust affected Georgia. Georgia's Jews, mostly in history, have been found especially around Savannah and Atlanta, but the latter has become Georgia's largest Jewish population. Although there were lots of small stores across the state, one of the most historical buildings in Atlanta is the Hebrew Benolian Congregational Synagogue, which was constructed in 1875. There were many Jewish leaders from Georgia during World War II. They are known as Jacob Rothschild and Harold Hirsch. Rothschild served as a rabbi for the Hebrew Benolian Congress. Atlanta's oldest and most prominent Jewish synagogue. Although known as the Temple throughout his rabbinates, Rothschild forged close relationships with members of the city's Christian clergy and helped to engineer Atlanta's moderate political consensus. Distinguished himself as a charismatic spokesperson for civil rights. In 1936, the Coca-Cola Company inaugurated Harold Hirsch, who helped recognize Atlanta's Jewish social service agency. Nowadays, the Georgia's legislature acknowledged the Holocaust annually with a ceremony. Relationships with his members of his city Christian clergy. This helped to engineer Atlanta's moderate political consensus, and it helped distinguish himself as a charismatic spokesperson for civil rights. In 1936, Coca-Cola Antonori Harold Hirsch helped recognize Atlanta's Jewish Social Service Agency. Nowadays, the Georgia legislation acknowledges the Holocaust annually with a ceremony. Many prominent figures attend throughout the state, including the governor. Also, located in Atlanta are the William Behrman Jewish Heritage and Holocaust Museum. Celebrating Jewish culture, embracing diversity, and promoting social justice. During World War II, the Holocaust impact on Georgia was minor. However, it has left a lasting impact on Georgia and the Jewish heritage. is celebrated throughout the state. Our next story tonight is going to be coming from Cade, and it's going to be on Carl Vinson. Take it away, Cade.
Carl Vinson. Carl Vinson was a United States representative from Georgia. He was a Democrat and served for more than 50 years in the United States House of Representatives. He was known as the father of the two-ocean Navy. Served 25 years consecutive terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. When he retired January 1965, he had served in the U.S. Congress for longer than anyone in history. He also set a record for service as chair of a standing committee. He carried the House Naval Affairs Committee for 16 years, and its successor, the House of Armed Services Committee, for 14 years. By concentrating on military affairs throughout his long career, Vinson became the foremost advocate of a strong national defense and most powerful voice in the Congress in shaping defense policies. Our next story tonight is going to be about President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his effect on Georgia. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you. Between 1924 and 1945, Franklin D. Roosevelt visited his Warm Springs in Georgia 41 times. In the early years, he spent his days exercising at his pool at the Warm Springs resort as he tried to build his leg muscles because he's paralyzed from the debilitating effects of polio and being paralyzed. After being elected as the 32nd President of the United States in 1932, he used his new home at the Warm Springs, the Little White House, as a retreat for his rigorous of leading a nation through the Great Depression. He died there in 1945. To a generation of West Georgians, he was both the president and a trusted friend who could be seen waving as he passed by his convertible or rode. President Roosevelt likely drew inspiration to create the New Deal programs such as the Agricultural Adjustment Administration and the Rural Rectification Administration during these drives. Indeed, the president called Warm Springs the birthplace of the Rural Electrification Administration in 1938. Georgia farmers were hit especially hard by the Great Depression, and the recovery was slowed by high cost of electricity, which was used 90% of urban homes and only 10% of rural homes. By 1935, electric companies were simply not willing to string miles of wires to widely disrespect rural families, so those families had to go without economic stimulants like the light bulb, the electric water pump, and the electric iron. Roosevelt himself felt this cost in the Warm Springs. His first electric bill at the Little White House was 4 times greater than of his New York home.
That concludes our newscast.
Thank you for watching.
Goodbye.
Okay, well,
You gotta end it.
yeah, you gotta.